Hello, and welcome everyone. This is FIDE Master Charles Galofre, and I'd like to welcome you to this video on the two knights defense. So let's go ahead and get started. After e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop to c4, black now plays knight f6, the two knights defense. Notice that this is different from bishop to c5, leading to the Giuoco Piano. So what could we say about the two knights? Well, the two knights is a counterattacking opening. Notice that white did not create any threats of his own, and as a result, black plays knight to f6, threatening knight takes c4. And the very essence of this opening is very tactical and tricky in nature. Black is at some point going to have to give back, sacrifice a pawn to maintain the equilibrium, and those are some of the lines that we're going to take a look at today. The main move here for white is knight to g5. Threatening the pawn in f7, and there is absolutely no way to there's only one way to satisfactorily defend the pawn, and that's by playing d5. An alternative here is bishop to c5, which leads to the Traxler counter gambit, but the Traxler, it's been heavily analyzed, heavily studied, but a recent analysis shows that after bishop takes f7, king e7, bishop d5, this position is better for white. There's some analysis between Bilyavsky and Anand in The Informant that you could find. Alternatively, my recommendation would be to play d4 for white and then to capture on f7. This gives you a more lively play. Because qualitatively speaking, the pawn on f7 is more valuable than the pawn on d4. Because even though the f7 pawn is a wing pawn or a flank pawn, it's taking away the possibility of castling for black. So going back to the initial position after d5, we have to sacrifice a pawn, because after pawn takes, if we play knight takes d5, this leads to the flood liver attack. White can play knight takes f7 here, and theory says that this leads to a draw, but alternatively, white can play d4, which is the absolute best move, and white has tremendous pressure here. There's various themes by attacking these focal points on f7, d5, f3, h5, the knight on g5, the bishop on c4, heavily pressuring black's position. So going back, the main move here is knight to d5. There are some counter-attacking alternatives, some lines where black sacrifices a pawn. For instance, knight to d4 is one possibility, and after c3, b5. This is a hyper-aggressive system for black, but theory does say that after bishop to f1, chances are favorable for white. The same goes for after b5 in this position. I really like this opening for black, but unfortunately it's also a variation that leads to favorable positions for white after bishop to f1. So with that said, after knight to a5, which is the main move, white typically plays bishop b5 check. Black plays c6, sacrificing a pawn. And here the main move is bishop to e2. Queen to f3 has been tried, and after queen to f3, black typically plays rook b8. And after bishop takes e6, knight takes c6, queen takes c6, instead of bishop d7, knight to d7. And this gives black enough compensation for the pawns. So going back, after bishop e2, black typically plays h6, knight f3. Knight h3 is a variation that was played by Stainitz and later popularized by Fischer. Play could continue bishop c5, castles, d3, bishop h3, pawn h3, queen d7, and after bishop f3, queen takes h3. We have a position with equal chances. Yes, black's king side is exposed, but white has the two bishops in an open board, and the knight on a5 is not favorably placed, and there's a severe weakness on c6, and as a result, this position is not as easy for black as it looks like it would be. So going back, after knight to f3, black plays e4, knight e5, and now bishop to d6. d4 is the main move. If f4 here, black could simply recapture, and after knight takes f3, his position is okay. Basically, What he wants to do is that he wants to castle centralize his rooks, bring them to the E and D files, and play queen to C7, C5, and bishop to B7, and at one point centralize this knight. And obviously he's not playing for exchanges, he's playing for activity in the position, and so that's what he has to follow. He has to follow those principles, keep those principles in mind. So after D4, which is the main move, black typically recaptures on D3, knight takes D3, and after queen C7, B3, and castles, we could say that black has enough compensation for the pawn, given to the fact that he's ahead in development. There are a ridiculous amount of open lines in the position, and as a result, he should be able to drum up enough counterplay. With that said, this is played often in Grandmaster play, and there are chances for obviously both sides.